Council. I hope you will enjoy our show. Stay with me. Thank you very much for joining me. Asqual and Betty, can you please just introduce yourself for my audience?
Yes, my name is Asqual Teferi. I am with Ethiopian American Civic Council, and I am a communications director. Thank you for inviting us.
And thank you for having me as well. I'm Betty Tekeste. I am a business and strategy consultant and media specialist. I live in Washington, D.C. area in Virginia, and I'm with ET Hub and AMN.
Thank you again for joining me. Let me start with Asqual, since you're from the Ethio-American Civic Council, and there is quite a misunderstanding by what it means by itself, HR 6600, especially here in Ethiopia. And let's just start off with that. Just give us a little insight about it.
So HR 6600 is drafted by Representative Malnowski, and also Gregory Meeks supports that. There's a couple of others that support it. It's an extremely harsh resolution, as you know, about within last year itself, about 4 of them. If you remember, there was these House Resolution 445 with the Africa Subcommittee Chair Karen Bass that was drafted last year. So we went to bat for that. All of the diaspora came together and we fought that. Karen Bass said, well, I'm going to go to Ethiopia and look and see this for myself. She went to Ethiopia. Karen Bass was briefed. She understood the situation on the ground. She came back and we all, the diaspora, Ethiopian American Civic Council, Dick and Yosef, they all were instrumental in revising the draft. So that resolution draft is sitting there. But now here comes HR 6600, which is extremely going to devastate Ethiopia if it ever becomes a bill. It has a lot of things that we can go in detail a little later on as to why it's really, really badly written.
But it says, I might say, so-called Ethiopia Stabilization, Peace and Democracy Act, right? As the name indicates, but it's quite a cliche.
Yes, it is a cliche and it's a catch because they're not going to issue something that says, well, we're going to destroy 110 million people with this resolution. They're going to make it look like a peace. And that is one of the most confusing aspects of this resolution is a lot of people are thinking that, hey, it's going to bring criminals that committed atrocities and genocide to justice. And it's not, absolutely not. It's far from that. It's all really to control the government of Ethiopia and what have you, to negotiate in terms that are not conducive for the Ethiopian larger population. And who does resolutions such as this one hurt? The poor, the mothers, and those that are already displaced because of the war. That's who is going to hurt. And that's why we're fighting it.
This is not the first campaign Ethiopians have been doing, like the No More movement. Ethiopians all over the world were denouncing Eritreans and other people of, even Americans as well, part of it were denouncing the No More, the pressure of the Western countries on Ethiopia as well in hashtag No More. Do you think the hashtag No More is quite effective and we can practice it in this HR 6600, Betty?
Yes, well, you're absolutely right. The No More movement was very successful in pulling together all Ethiopians and Eritreans in the diaspora, as well as the global diaspora and African population and others within the continent. The movement itself was very symbolic as it galvanized all African people really to stand against Western aggression and to fight for rights of keeping our sovereignty in Africa, in all nations. And obviously it was the war in Ethiopia and the conflict that's taken over almost a year and a half now that galvanized it and that motivated and inspired the movement, but it speaks for so many other nations as well in similar situations. So I do believe that it has the ability to mobilize the masses just like it did before and be very effective in this current fight that we have with this bill.
How is the diaspora ready this time around? Because it's not as easy as it looks, because it has, when you look deep into it, it's very threatening, and you are close to the senators as well. So how ready is the diaspora in this regard?
Well, the truth is the diaspora, much like most of our community, most Ethiopians, right now in the current political atmosphere, there is a lot of division. There's a lot of people with different ideas about what this bill represents, but it speaks to the response from Ethiopia and Ethiopians about what's going on, and just questions and confusion around where to stand right now, because it's become such a complex issue. So it's a challenge. It's a challenge because we do have Ethiopians in the diaspora who are supporting this bill with very false perceptions of what it's supposed to do. One of the key things being with their disappointment with how things have gone with this conflict. Ethiopian government has responded per se, so it has, by title, it seems as though it has good intention, and it's always written that way. It's never drafted to say we're going to destroy you or we're going to collapse your economy, etc. It's not. The intent in itself, may be framed around what seems to be a need that Ethiopia has. However, when you actually dissect the text and what it says it's going to do, there's several things that are wrong with it. Several, if anything, all of it is not intended for good for Ethiopia at this context, because it's very intrusive. It requires the Ethiopian government to send mass reports about all the reports and the UN investigation, the joint UN investigation that was done. It asks for, access into our lands, into the borders. So it's extremely draconian. It's extremely, it will extremely destabilize, not stabilize, because with the current situation, everything that's going on, economic sanctions and borrowing loans and such that actually help Ethiopians, not the Ethiopian government per se, but Ethiopians and people who have advantages with this. It's extremely negative in nature, and it actually will cripple the nation's ability to reconstruct itself and go back to economic prosperity and the growth it was doing before this conflict.
Last call coming to you. The Ethio-American Civic Council has been organizing different stages to discuss about HR, and even the chairman and the co-founder, Deacon Yosef, has also been given a lot of interviews. Have tried to look for what he has said and quote, the laws governing these measures are already in the books for the Department of States to utilize when appropriate. And HR 6600 will not fulfill the stated purpose nor resolve the current crisis in Ethiopia. Therefore, EACC, that is to mean Ethio-American Civic Council, appeal to the American people to call their representative in Congress and demand not to support HR 6600. So how was the appeal accepted, and what was the progress?
Council is targeting, since this whole thing started, I think we reached out with letters, phone calls, and face-to-face conversation over 970 representatives and extension of the representatives of the United States government. We have written a decisive letter to Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi is the Speaker of the House, as you know. There's 3 branches of the United States government. There is the executive branch, the judiciary branch, which are the judges, and also the legislature, which are the Congress. They make the laws. Think of these people in Congress, both in the House of Representatives and Senate, as presidents themselves or kings, let's say. And I think she's an assistant secretary of the state for African affairs. She testified before Congress when asked about classifying atrocities as, they're all rushing to try to classify in this war that there's some sort of atrocities and genocide committed, where all of the UN and independent studies show otherwise, but they're pushing that. But she made a very significant testimony in front of the House of Representatives, and she said, when they asked her to push this narrative of atrocities, genocide, she answered by saying, our primary focus has been on trying to engage diplomacy in many ways available to us. We have decided to, because when the lobbyists lobby, it's public information. So we know that they wrote it. We know that the TPLF supporters are promoting this everywhere. So we know who wrote it. We know the enemy wrote it to dismantle Ethiopia. So we went in all aspects of our advocacy to present the facts. And believe it or not, it's making a big progress, a dent, because, for example, the S3199 was supposed to be reviewed on the 23rd. The lobbyists were pushing it. Now that's postponed today. We're going to fight in order to show objectively that this is just simply a rush job by lobbyists and it's going to hurt Ethiopia. It gives a free hand to TPLF. Although that there's several documentations that show factual UN documentation that show TPLF caused the war, TPLF committed atrocities, TPLF committed a rape, TPLF still, even when Ethiopia showed good faith and they withdrew, they're still fighting, they're still occupying.
We have some sort of information, Betty, that the diaspora community, who are Ethiopians as well, are signing petition for the success of this HR 6600 and S3199 as well. And do you have any information about that? And if so, what do you think is the reason behind?
So yes, I'm very familiar with the petition that's been out there to support this bill. I actually had an interesting conversation with the gentleman who started the petition. It's a lot of false information. Let me just start there, because it's been created to, actually create confusion about what the bill is about. It doesn't really get into the text and what it's asking for. Instead, it highlights parts of the bill that are speaking to, we want to establish humanitarian, support for all regions, and it's to protect people from human rights violations, et cetera, et cetera. So the way they've phrased it is they've targeted the community that is frustrated, upset, they're needing answers, they feel like the internal issues have not been resolved to their satisfaction. There is lots of issues that we're clearly familiar with. And I actually want to take a moment to just say, when we're talking about these things, we're talking from the legal perspective, what it means, what it could impact on Ethiopia. But in no way is it to be insensitive to the issues that are going on. And, any conflict or atrocities that happen in any region, it's a problem. It's an internal change towards, we don't want anybody to suffer. And this, in no way, by opposing this bill, are you promoting that, because that's the kind of angle it takes, that if you support this, that it's going to stop all of these issues, which is completely false. So I mentioned that I spoke to the gentleman actually in a panel discussion on a social media platform. And he was presenting his case about this to people to get them to sign it, to support this. And one of the things that he said that I thought was very, very false and inflammatory was that the Peace and Democracy Act is saying that a new constitution will be created in Ethiopia. And I asked him directly to say, what is it about this? Where do you read Ethiopians and solve the problems internally? And it's completely false, because that's not what it does. When it says it's sanctioning, it doesn't specify who it sanctions, for one. It says all sides of the atrocities, all sides of the conflict, excuse me, which means, are we talking about the aggressors, or are we talking about the people who are standing in defense of their country, of their regions? It doesn't specify. So problems, because when it says all, it includes anybody who was involved. And there's things like this. And also, there's weapon sanctions, which means that it's going to cripple Ethiopia's defense. And then there's a border issue I mentioned earlier with unfettered access. So we're talking about, collapsing the economy potentially with all these different financial development programs being canceled. On top of that, you're talking weapons and defense sanctions, which basically makes Ethiopia vulnerable from all internal and external threats. So all the problems that we're seeing with what we need is more security. We need more law enforcement. We need more regional support and, protection of citizens. So when you're proposing that you're taking away defense mechanisms from the country directly, you're exposing the country to all sorts of problems and taking money and financial assistance to the people out of the game in the time of trouble, which increases issues, as we know. So it doesn't speak to the facts, it's misleading, and it's asking people to sign it to express their frustration. So what it's really doing is using a time where people are vulnerable and disappointed and telling them this is a solution, but it's not, because it does not and it will not provide justice for any of these things.
You're watching Addis Media Network, Addis TV. I'm having a discussion about the HR 6600 draft bill. We'll continue our discussion after a break. To reverse what is intended.
And in the last rally, we co-sponsored the No More. We went out and did everything. People just turned up. Mm. Now, is it Christians being killed in jihadist style? The type of gruesome killings that the diaspora listens and hears every day. It was just horror. And I think this is the doing of TPLF in Egypt again, just like the way they wrote the HR 6600. You can see, there's real evidence to indicate, of course, TPLF has admitted that they were Shene. And so we're not getting the participants that we need right now, because even for rally, I'll give you an example. Rally, we're going to go out here in San Francisco Bay Area. We're going out on the 25th. And Betty's they're doing one in DC. People turn up.
And there is one also on Monday, right?
Monday, DC. But there's a big one right now supporting HR 66. So now we're actually in competition with our own people, our supporters. And like Betty says, we have to really be sensitive about why they're upset. For any democracy to thrive, you need your people with you. The people make the democracy. The government is the people, and the people is the government. In this instance, the people are split more than half. So that's something that we are struggling with right now. So it's a challenge, and I do believe the Ethiopian government can participate in changing the narrative a little bit, maybe explaining for people to understand, to participate, and so forth and so on. But it's very tricky. The way the bill is written, it says that it will bring people that have committed crime, let's say in Wallaka area against Amhara, or in Afar area, TPLF, Amara and Afar area. They think these people are going to be brought to justice. I'm cautious about that. The conclusion whereby we're going to say, okay, genocide is committed, atrocities committed, let's put these people in jail. It's going to be an independent investigator with unfettered access. I tweeted the other day and I said we should just really wipe out unfettered access from the dictionary, because I am just tired of hearing it. That means give your sovereignty up. We can send, who's the investigator? Who's going to call the shots? Mm-hmm. Guess what? Your enemy is going to send the investigator. How is it going to be fair and adequate, and you don't have any guarantee who's going to be charged for atrocities or genocide. Because from what we've seen, most of the resolutions give TPLF just walk away as if TPLF didn't even do anything wrong whatsoever. And so, it's going to be very lopsided. So we're concerned about that.
As Qual said, Betty, the diaspora, irrespective of their political views or whatsoever, how do you think they should come together for their country? Because no matter what, their country should come first, in my opinion, actually. But what do you think should be done so that the diaspora should come all together, irrespective of their political views, so that they will sustain what Ethiopia means for all of us?
Well, first, thank you for asking that question. I'm going to add to what Asqual was just saying, which is, we have differences in ideological understanding and whatever perspective we have. Politics is complex. What's really sad is the fact that we have been, because of the 27 years of this ethnic federal state that Ethiopia has been, people have been somehow, changed in their perspective of what their identity is. And for some of us who have not lived in Ethiopia throughout the entire time frame, Ethiopia is still what it was to us, which is one. We were one people of multiple ethnic groups, all combined into becoming one nation. And we never, focused on, oh, I am from this. We never had a tribalistic mentality. We recognized our culture wherever we are from, which is perfectly fine. I think our diversity is our strength. But for most of us, that's what the case was. For some people, especially now with what's happened and what, these conflicts and issues within each region, and specifically the problems within Wallada and other areas where Amhara people have been killed indiscriminately. Afar people are being, have suffered, not only, through the conflict while it was happening, that they're bordering, Tigray, where the TPLF were attacking. Their lands were, ravaged. So all of these things that have happened have naturally caused a lot of grief, a lot of frustration, and this has impacted a lot of our people in a, it's impacted all of us, honestly, all of us. But first thing that we have to all understand is we are not just, being attacked by one force. We have multiple attacks going on. We have a mass disinformation campaign that's been waged against the country. We have, and you've seen it throughout the year. We've seen all the major mainstream news literally lying and disinforming the world about what's going on. It's placed Ethiopia in a very critical situation where our sovereignty, the country's, future is being completely sabotaged for multiple external interests, including the internal strife that we have going on. So when you understand the fact that this is the way that we can only fight division by being united. So the way we come together is by first recognizing that these things are happening. So when people are denying the pain that's going on and the suffering, it causes even more gaps of understanding, because we have to stand for our people wherever they're from. What happens in Afar should concern me because these are my people. And this kind of mentality has been fractured badly. And when you see targeted attacks and deaths and atrocities in just one or two regions, the people from here are completely frustrated. So it's upon us, the way I believe, to reach out to these people, to explain why we need to stand together, and also explain what's really happening with this bill at this point in time. Only focus on a micro level. We have to look at the external threat from a bigger perspective, the future, what could entail, and also explain it and how does this actually affect Amhara region or Afar region. If we don't have security, it's not just the Ethiopian National Defense Force that's going to be impacted. It's everybody. Our security for all the regional forces is also compromised. So when you get to a point of understanding, we get to a point of actually listening to each other. And we really have to put aside our differences and come together. And there's actually a lot of work being done. Asqual mentioned it earlier. It's not just talking to the government of the US and resisting that, but we're talking to our other Ethiopian communities and trying to bridge that gap and resist the division that's going on, because that's essential to our being successful and standing for Ethiopia together.
So let's just finalize and give me a final remark, especially on the coming Monday and other rallies to be held in the US as well. I'll give you one chance for each of you.
Okay, I'm going to make it really short. I wanted to encourage everybody to sign the petition. Also, it's going to hurt the already marginalized Amara and Afar, and it's going to devastate the country, causing a very bad regional instability, which would make it exposed to terrorism and what have you, and also will totally inhibit the effort to restore us by the war. So I want us all to work together and heal our country. Thank you.
Yes, and in closing, I just want to add again that it's essential that we stand together to fight any external threat to Ethiopia, because this is about country. There may be a lot of wrong information that's being pushed. It's, very encouraged that anybody, especially Ethiopia, please sign the petition and show your opposition to HR 6600 and S 3199, because what you do now is going to increase the mass of voices that we hear to support Ethiopia.
Thank you very much for everything that you have said, and I hope we will succeed in this, and we'll keep updated on the rallies, especially Asqua.
Well, I want to thank you, really. Yes, the 25th and the 28th in Washington, D.C.
Thank you very much. Well, viewers, that's about it. I hope you've got very detailed information about the HR 6600 draft bill and what is exactly the impact of this draft bill in Ethiopia, and also the involvement of the Ethio-American Civic Council, and also the involvement of the diaspora community in the US. Thank you for staying with us. Have a good time.